Greetings and welcome to Miles More Motivation, the show that's designed to give you more happiness, fulfillment, and obviously a little bit of motivation. In this episode, we're going to talk about what to do when you're struggling. Obviously, at the time of doing this video, we are going through the coronavirus pandemic, and obviously it's been a tough year, and I know a lot of people who are struggling. At the start of the first lockdown back in March, I was definitely struggling. My income went to zero, and I had a few head in hands moments in those early days of the lockdown, really uncertain, worried, not really knowing what to do. And I was fearful, like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, my income was great, consistent, reliable. I love what I did, presenting seminars and workshops in hotels all over the country, great leverage of time. It was kind of perfect, but that obviously went. And it was a real struggle for me, but one of the things I've learned is that there's always somebody worse off, right? There's always somebody worse off. And one of the things I made a real point of doing at the start of lockdown was kind of checking in with people who I knew were not maybe so mindset savvy, people that I knew were not maybe that might be susceptible to not taking good care of themselves emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And one friend in particular who I messaged was really struggling, like really struggling, and you wouldn't have known because his social media posts were not giving that impression whatsoever, but because of the kind of relationship we have, he really opened up with me, and there was a lot of trust there. And he basically said, I'm not in a good place. Now, me and this friend have had a long-standing kind of message to each other for years. His friend has suffered from depression over the years, and we've had this, and so have I. We've had this long-standing thing where we call it need to talk, want to talk. So what that effectively means is, want to talk is just to talk about football and like just random stuff, right? Need to talk is drop what you're doing, and as soon as one of us is free in the next like half an hour, we'll get on the phone and have a chat. So this is definitely a message especially to men, because I know that stereotypically men don't open up as much as women. Stereotypically, I think evidence would suggest from suicide rates, for example, they're much higher for men than they are for women, and I think that a lot of that is down to what we're going to share in this video. So what I want to do kind of with you is share with you 3 things to think about and to consider, 3 tools, 3 strategies, 3 really common sense things, but not necessarily common practice ways to kind of help you change perspective, because I think that's a really important thing when you're struggling. So the first one is you've got to have what we call internal transparency. Internal transparency, what that ultimately means is, first thing you've got to do is you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest with yourself and admit, I'm struggling. You've got to be honest with yourself and admit that you're not in a good headspace. Until you're honest with yourself and you're just kind of telling the world and everybody else that everything's fine, when inside you're a hot mess, things are never going to change. I always say keeping things in when you don't feel good is like keeping your finger on a kettle that's boiling and keeping your finger on, right? It just keeps boiling and boiling and boiling and boiling. Now, I've never done that, but I'm guessing at some point it's probably going to like explode, right? Well, there's going to be a serious consequence for that, which is not worth trying, right? Don't try that at home if you're watching and you're considering that, right? So you've got to be honest with yourself. You know, I know so many people, and I'm not going to mention names, but I know so many people who I can just tell are struggling. And when I ask them how you're doing, and they go, yeah, I'm good, I'm fine, everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. I know it's because maybe they don't know me well enough, maybe we haven't built enough trust, but the fact is, you can tell when someone says they're great, but actually inside they're not. So the first thing you've got to do, if that's you and you're like, shit, that's me, is you've got to be honest with yourself. Right, so that's the first thing. Second thing is you've got to do what we call external transparency. Remember I told you my friend, who remain nameless, want to talk, need to talk? You've got to be willing to actually open up and say, I'm struggling, like I'm not in a good headspace. And know that that's not a bad thing. You know, the personal development space in bookshops used to be called self-help. I think they changed the name because it had negative connotations to it. A lot of people don't like the term help, but in actual fact, one of the best things I've learned about going to seminars on personal development, mindset, even business, marketing, sales. It's help. But you see, the problem is the ego, which is the part of us that wants to protect us, doesn't want us to reach out for help in case we get rejected. Because that's one of our biggest fears, that we'll get rejected, that we'll actually reach out to someone and say, I'm struggling, can you help? And someone says, sorry, I'm really busy right now, I'm posting on Instagram or whatever, right? So the fact is we don't like to admit when we need help. We don't like to admit when we're struggling because we have a fear of that we're going to get rejected or laughed at or something even worse. So you've got to be willing to get help and be willing to be honest. And the way to do that is just think about who in your life do you know that you could go to. And if there's no one in your life that you can go to, then you seriously need to pick up the phone and consider calling Samaritans or getting a counsellor or getting a life coach. But there's always someone out there that's willing to help, always. But you've got to have that belief that someone's out there willing to help. And often getting help from someone you don't know is better because they're objective and they'll look at it from a real neurological point of view and not just like, rub on the shoulder, you'll be okay, because that's not often the best way to help a person when they're struggling. And the last thing, which is kind of one that's a bit outside the box, but I think it's really worth considering, is what I call love forward. What this means is, if you're going through a tough period right now and you're struggling, the best thing that I can suggest is to do something for somebody else. Go and do something for somebody else. Go and call a friend and check how they're doing. Buy the person behind you coffee. Maybe you can't do that right now because of lockdown, but the point is, we have 6 human needs and one of them is contribution. And spiritually, and you'll know this from experience, when you do something good for someone else, it makes you feel good. So what it does is it shines the light on somebody else rather than what you're currently doing, which is shining the light on yourself. And there's nothing wrong with shining the light on yourself. When you're struggling, you need to be honest with yourself that you're struggling and then be honest with someone else. But one of the fastest ways to shift that, when I don't feel good, I think, how can I help somebody? Who can I help? The other day I went for a run. I didn't feel good, so I went for a run to change my state. Then I did a Facebook Live, which was designed to basically say, hey, I wasn't feeling good 20 minutes ago, so I went for a run to change my state, and then I thought I'd do a video because I thought maybe somebody else is at home right now not feeling good, and this might help them. So 3 things if you're struggling right now: internal transparency, you've got to be honest with yourself. External transparency, you've got to be honest with somebody else that you can trust. And third is love forward. Who can you help today that is maybe worse off than you, or maybe that you could just help and do something nice for, because automatically that's probably going to make you feel good as well. That's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, like it, share it, whatever you like to do. Comment as well if you've got opinions on this. If you're struggling and you want to tell me about it, send me a direct message and I'll communicate with you in private. I'd love to be help if I can. So that's it. Miles of Motivation, over and out. See you next time. God bless.